Will Trump's one big beautiful bill affect you, your employees, or your business? The answer is probably, but it may not be exactly what you thought it would be. So if you haven't yet heard, Trump's one big beautiful bill, which includes no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, was passed in July of 2025, this year. We are still awaiting some instruction and information about how this is going to work, but I can break down what we know right now. So when it comes to the no tax on tips, we are talking about qualified tips, and we are waiting for the list of businesses that the administration will deem as tipped industries. Qualified tips are going to be those that the person giving the tip gets to decide how much to give. So, of course, that begs the question, if you've ever been to a restaurant and you've had a large party and they add an auto tip on there, is that not going to count now? But it is clearly defined that qualified tips are only those where the person is deciding how much to give. So service charges and added gratuities where the customer is not allowed to determine the amount, by definition, would not qualify. Now, a person who makes tips can claim up to $25,000 in qualified tips on their income tax return. Now, this is an above the line deduction, which means you do not have to itemize to be able to claim it, and it will reduce your total taxable income. Now, with the no tax on tips, if you are married, you do have to file a married filing jointly return to be able to claim your tips. And for 2025, there will not be any changes to payroll systems or tax calculations. There won't be any refund of tax. Rather, the employee will just be able to claim qualified amounts on their 2025 income tax return, which may result in a refund. But payroll is only one piece of a person's income tax return. So keep that in mind. Doesn't necessarily mean you will absolutely get a refund if you earned tips. There's also a wage base of $150,000 for single filers and $300,000 for married. And the amount that you can claim in tips will go down if your total wage is over those thresholds. So with the no tax on tips, another thing to keep in mind is we are talking specifically about federal income tax. There are no other changes to any other tax types when it comes to tips. Now, when we're talking about the no tax on overtime, this one is making some people very sad. So what they're talking about is the additional pay that you're receiving for overtime. So according to FLSA rules, overtime is paid at 1.5 times the employee's regular rate of pay for all hours worked over 40 in a work week. So if you're looking at your pay stub and you're looking at a breakout between regular and overtime pay, unless your employer is already splitting that up to where the overtime is only overtime premium and only showing the additional 0.5 times pay, it's not going to be that full amount that you see on the overtime line. Put another way, in the 1.5 times that you make for overtime, only the additional 0.5 times is the overtime pay that we're talking about that there won't be tax on. And just like with the tips, this is only federal income tax that we're talking about. There have been no changes to the taxation of overtime for any other tax types. So with the overtime, single filers can claim up to $12,500, married $25,000, and just like the no tax on tips, there are wage bases where if you exceed $150,000 as a single filer or $300,000 as a married filer, then the amount of overtime that you can claim will decrease accordingly. So if you are in states like California, Alaska, or Nevada, you have a problem because there is daily overtime there, which is more generous than the federal overtime. but only the calculation of federal overtime qualifies for the overtime that won't be taxed for federal income tax purposes. So we will definitely see some changes to payroll systems next year, probably changes to 941s, W-2s, excluding amounts from being taxed in the first place, perhaps. But it's going to get really interesting with those states that have more generous overtime rules than federal, because now you will have to have the calculation of what amount to pay the employee, but also a separate calculation of the federal overtime amount, if any. So it's going to get pretty dicey, and we're super excited to figure all this out with everyone, but we plan to keep everyone updated as we learn more. For this year, they are saying right now that business owners can provide the information of tax or tips to employees by a reasonable means. But of course, we are expecting them to come out with more formal guidance on what that will look like, what information needs to be provided, in what format, if anything needs to be reported to the IRS or Social Security Administration. So there's a lot of TBDs when it comes to this, even though we're already in the middle of August. One little nugget in the big, beautiful bill that might help small business owners is that the threshold for 1099 miscellaneous and non-employee compensation has increased, or will increase, I should say, from $600 to $2,000, but that does not take effect until the 2026 tax year. So for the 2025 tax year, or the 1099s that you would be required to issue in January of 2026, the $600 threshold still applies. But for next year, the 1099s that you will file in January of 2027 for the 2026 tax year, the threshold requirement for issuing those will be $2,000. So that could eliminate quite a bit of paperwork for some small businesses, but something that not a lot of people are currently talking about. I know for me personally, that will take care of quite a few 1099s that we normally issue. So as always, if you have questions, feel free to drop them below, or you can always find us online at valorpayrollsolutions.com.